The conference is now being recorded.
Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon as we discuss the proposed Diversity and Inclusion Commitment Statement and amendments to the AJLI Bylaws and the operational policies approved by the Junior Leagues, which are also known as the OPALs. So I'd like to introduce the board members and staff who are on this webinar with us. So in addition to myself and Eileen Goodwin, we do have several members of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with us: Ann Townsend, Mary Jo Hunt, Shuba Lembach, and staff members who have been on the committee with us also: Ann Dalton, Carrie Holmes, and Delacia Gittins. So I do want to get started, and what we're going to do today is give you an overview and timeline of where we are today, and then we'll review the motions that are part of the business meeting. Our current reaching out statement: Junior Leagues reach out to women of all races, religions, and national origins who demonstrate an interest in and commitment to volunteerism, was adopted in 1978. The language in our reaching out statement is embedded in both our bylaws and in the OPALs. So any change to our current statement does require a vote by membership. Recognizing the importance of diversity and inclusion, at the annual conference in 2013, the Leagues adopted an advisory resolution asking the AJLI Board to review the current language of the reaching out statement. The resolution asked that the statement be reviewed by the Board to ensure it reflects the past 40 years of social change. Inspired by this, the Board took the opportunity to explore the Association's values around diversity and inclusion. As part of the 2013-14 governance plan. Okay, so I'm going to remind people if you could go on either mute on your phone or *1, please. Thank you. As part of the 13-14 governance plan, the AJLI Board established a Diversity and Inclusion Board Committee. And throughout the year, the Board reviewed current diversity and inclusion practices, including other organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit. We reviewed current promising and best practices in Junior Leagues, and we learned about the impact of demographic changes, including those in Canada, Mexico, and Great Britain. During this education period, the Board further determined that it would be helpful to create a task force of Junior League members who had a background in diversity and inclusion work. 13 Junior League members were selected, and recommendations concerning next steps regarding the Junior League's commitment to diversity and inclusion were presented to the AJLI Board at the December 2014 Board meeting. The Diversity and Inclusion Board Committee continued as part of the 2014-2015 governance plan. At Fall Conference, the Board facilitated a conversation about the benefits and disadvantages of maintaining, amending, or developing a new reaching out statement. In addition, at the 2013 ODI in Indianapolis, the Leagues were asked, in what ways do you believe diversity and inclusion contribute to Leagues having a greater impact in their communities? At the 2014 ODI in Kansas City, the Leagues were asked, what do we need in order to build a more diverse and inclusive Junior League? At Winter Leadership in Orlando, we facilitated a conversation around our shared values around diversity and inclusion. This is what the Board heard from the Leagues. As important as it is to be clear about our shared values around diversity, the vast majority of respondents indicated that we also need to address inclusion. A more comprehensive statement, rather than a statement itemizing elements of diversity, is what most of you were leaning towards. And regardless of how the shared values are expressed, there's a strong desire for training and resources from AJLI to support League efforts to be diverse and inclusive organizations. Based on what the Board heard from the Leagues at both Fall and Winter Leadership, the ODIs, recommendations from the task force, the Board had further conversation at the February 27th, 28th Board meeting. After much deliberation, the Board has proposed a diversity and inclusion statement for the Leagues to consider. The Junior League welcomes all women who value our mission. we are committed to inclusive environments of diverse individuals, organizations, and communities. As we learn, there's also been dramatic changes to the legal landscape concerning public accommodation laws that protect a growing range of people and conditions. These laws vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, making it virtually impossible for there to be a single minimum standard in the AJLI bylaws that apply to all junior leagues. Based on this ever-changing environment, the board is recommending that the junior leagues delete the language around the current reaching out statement from the bylaws and amend the language in the opals. So what this slide is showing is a clip from our website that shows our mission statement, our vision statement, our current reaching out statement, our purpose, and the power of the association. In the next slide, we look at what it would look like with the reaching out statement coming out and our statement about our commitment to diversity and inclusion coming in. And even though this statement won't be housed in the bylaws, we are going to be living it and sharing it for the world to see. So it's housed here as an example so you can see on the website what it would look like, along with our other internal and outwardly facing materials. Our hopes that it will become an innate part of each and every junior league as well as the association. So I'm now going to turn this over to Eileen to review the motions, but I want to stop here and see if there's any questions so far. Okay, Eileen.
Thanks, Cynthia. So let's review the proposed motions. And if you had a chance to download your call to conference materials, there's a handy chart on page 18 that really lays out exactly the motions in the voting order as well as some notes related to the motions. And as you can see from that chart, there's actually 5 proposed motions. They're in a certain order because the board, the task force that we've talked about, and many of the leagues told us that they wanted to make sure we always had some sort of statement in place regarding the subject of diversity. Therefore, we want to adopt a new commitment statement before we amend any of the bylaws because we do not want to end up with without some sort of statement on this important topic. So as you can see on the slide here, motion 1 has the potential new association diversity inclusion commitment statement on it. And Cynthia has already read this. And I just wanted to make the point that this language is completely and totally amendable at annual conference. So please keep that one in mind. The rationale for this new language was the desire to have it includes a specific proactive statement covering both diversity and inclusion, because you heard we've had a lot of feedback regarding the concept of inclusion. And the board is suggesting that the mission be referenced, as you can see in this proposed language. There was also a desire to be specific about a reference to women proactively. This language, as I mentioned, can be amended and debated on the floor, and we will have time to discuss this during the governance dialogue at annual conference. And we strongly suggest that if you wish to make an amendment, that you be prepared to discuss your thoughts with your sister leagues at dialogue so that you can gain feedback and make any desired changes prior to the business meeting. Instructions on this process can be found in the call to conference packet. And at the end of this presentation, I'll be going through the times for these various meetings so you can put that on your calendar. So now I'm going to move to the next 2 motions. And these motions are less flexible in their wording because they address amendments to bylaws and policies, and they're subject to parliamentary procedure rules. And the first motion removes the references to our reaching out statement from the bylaws. And so the rationale for this is to remove those portions of the qualifications for membership, inclusive of the reaching out statement, that reference our AJLI and league values. We would remove these references from the bylaws as shown on page 20 in the call to conference materials. And if you're following along in that PDF, you can see that there's a lot of strike-through language that we don't have up here on the slide that's on your computer. While the mission or the purpose of an organization must be included in the bylaws, the best practices indicate that an association's vision and any value statements should be housed elsewhere. And in 2009, some of you may recall, the association adopted our current vision statement, which is not included in our bylaws. And this proposed commitment statement pertains to our values and therefore would be housed with our vision statement. And as you saw from Cynthia, it would reside on the website right next to the vision statement. Motion 3 follows Motion 2, and I will make the point that if the previous motion does not pass, the statement is left in the bylaws for some reason, then Motion 3 would not move forward at annual conference because Motion 3 is contingent upon Motion 2 passing. Motion 3 would amend the sections of our operational policies approved by the Junior Leagues, or OPALs, that reference specific values, including the reaching out statement, and replace them with broader language concerning complying with all applicable laws and ordinances. And again, if you're following along in your call to conference, this is outlined on page 21. So the rationale for this motion is that the Board of Directors, in consultation with our legal counsel, has determined that it's a best practice to remove all value statements from the AJLI governing documents. So the removal of point 2.3 is consistent with the above proposed amendment in the bylaws. The proposed change to 2.4 would now require that a league be in compliance with all applicable laws and ordinances in its own jurisdiction, which of course can vary greatly from one area to another. And because we are getting rid of, we would be striking through the section 2.3, that this 2.4 would then of course become 2.3. And then the proposed change to 2.5 updates and broadens our current policy regarding holding meetings and functions in facilities that do not discriminate on any basis. And of course, it would be renamed as 2.4. So now I'm moving on to motion number 4. This motion will be considered even if a commitment statement fails, so it is not contingent. Motion 4 would make the following changes to the operational policies approved by Junior League, or OPAL, to make them consistent with our commitment to diversity and inclusion. So the rationale for Motion 4, it addresses the Governance Committee's procedures. The Board is proposing to add language that the slating process ensures that the AJLI Board and the AJLI Governance Committee be diverse and inclusive. Also, this motion would substitute diversity and inclusion for the words multiculturalism. And again, if you're following along in your call to conference packet, there's more detail on page 22. And then finally, motion 5 is a procedural motion. This is the type of motion that allows the secretary to make editorial corrections, such as typos and very subtle things like that. And this would allow us to clean up any obvious mistakes after the annual conference. This motion is proposed and passed at all of our business meetings. So, as a recap, motion 1 is fully amendable from the floor. So please be sure to submit your amendments to the AJLI Board as soon as possible so that we may confer with our parliamentarian and get back to you if there's any issues with proposed new language. Also, be prepared to discuss your thoughts with your fellow league leaders at the governance dialogue by submitting a dialogue topic. And again, your instructions are in the call to conference packet. Motions 2.2 through 4 have limited ability for amendments, as I mentioned before. And if you have any questions about amending these motions, please see the Rules Committee and or Dr. Bierbaum, our parliamentarian, during the governance office hours, which I'll go through in just a moment. And then finally, motion 5 again allows the secretary to edit our governing documents to match the intent of the motions passed. So now we move on to actually when we'll be having the governance dialogue. As you can see, it's scheduled for Friday, April 17th from 8:45 to 10 in the morning. And if you have an item you'd like to discuss at that time, please be sure to submit your dialogue topic by 6:30 p.m. on Thursday to be included on that agenda. And as you can see here, the rules for that include open discussion. Any delegate, not just the voting delegate, can speak at the governance dialogue, and straw polls may be conducted. Now, our annual business meeting, as many of you know, is a more formal affair, and that will be held on Saturday, April 18th from 8:45 to 10 o'clock in the morning. The advisory resolutions must be submitted by Friday at 6:30 to be included on the agenda. Please note that the voting delegates must have their red voting ribbon, red voting card, and any proxy materials assigned to them as they enter the ballroom. Voting delegates will be asked to sit up front at a table with a colored card. A non-voting delegate will be seated in the rear of the room at tables without the colored card. This will be more clear when you're in the ballroom. This will allow us to easily tabulate the votes in a timely manner and ensure that only those credentialed approach the mic to speak during our business session. As was mentioned earlier, there will be governance office hours, and the final version of this will be posted at registration at annual conference. Here are our tentative hours, which are also listed on the call to conference packet. And as was already mentioned, our parliamentarian also makes himself available during these office hours if you have questions about amending one of the trickier motions. And then, as we wrap up, we want to be sure that you bring your copy of call to conference packet along with any supplemental materials listed in the packet that you think you may need. While we will have Wi-Fi in the hotel, please don't rely on being able to download it for this purpose. If all of you attempt to download the materials during the session, our server will crash. So if you have a question, please feel free to unmute your phone by hitting *1 on your phone's keypad now. And we'll start by answering questions that were typed into the chat box and then ask for any last questions that you might have. Delicia, could you please read our first question?
And we don't have anything in the chat box, so we're going to wait for people to unmute their phone by hitting *1 and ask away.
I have a question. This is Julie Bagley from Dallas. On the motion number 2, the letter E, where it says accomplish the purpose of the organization through sound financial and resource management, is that considered a value statement, and is that why it's being removed? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the diversity components.
Well, this is Eileen. I think that's a very good question. I don't have a good answer for it. Does someone else in the committee have an answer for why that one was struck through?
And it's, Cynthia, we actually may need to get back to you on that. We did talk about this at the board, unless somebody else is remembering. We did talk about this at the board table, and we did talk about the financial statements. And I don't know if Mary Jo or Ann are on. I think we are looking at it with the minimum standards, that minimum standards in general and best practice should all be pulled out of bylaws.
I think I can help a little bit. When these qualifications, A through E, were first adopted, they were, and this goes back to 1992, they were considered to be a set of core values that every junior league commits to. There are, and will remain, in the minimum standards in the opals, a series of financial conditions that leagues are expected to maintain, how they conduct their financial record keeping through generally accepted accounting principles, the fact that they are required to have an annual audit or review of their financial records, that they're required to notify the association if there's any change in their charitable status. Those financial practices will remain as minimum standards. I think this one was just part of, 3 or 4 other values, not all of which have to do with diversity either, but are all sort of a values nature. So I think that's the logic.
And I would also, this is Cheryl Lembach, I would also add to that, part of the conversation the board had is thinking about the legal landscape. And the reality of it is the legal landscape with respect to public accommodations laws in relation to values around diversity and inclusion, et cetera, are far more complex than things like making sure that an organization has its financial ducks in a row, so to speak.
I mean, I don't think there's any suggestion, Julie, that financial good practices are a good thing. I don't think anybody is
Right.
suggesting that be
No,
right.
it stood out to me as being very different than the other statements.
It is. You're right.
And do you happen to know where in the opals that do you know off the top of your head? I'm sure I can find it, but where those
where
financial
the
ones
stuff
are
I
located?
mentioned, yeah, it's in Section 2, Minimum Standards of Charter, Constitution, and Bylaws.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
This is Julie again. I have one more question.
Sure.
On motion 3, I guess the amended 2.3 where it's adding in, the junior leagues will not discriminate as defined in applicable laws and ordinance in its jurisdiction. So how do you see this impacting age restrictions for leagues?
This is Shuba again. My answer to that is going to be, it really depends. I think that's going to involve specifically what those applicable laws are and what applies to your league within your jurisdiction. So that can really vary. So it's hard to say with any clear definition what impact that could have on age restrictions in terms of compliance with local laws.
This is Mary Jo. It also will be related to what are the privileges of membership that you accord to people based on an age restriction or an age category. And again, we don't know in all 292 leagues what the local laws or ordinances are, nor do we know off the top of our head what all 292 leagues are doing in regards to any age restrictions or privileges of membership restrictions related to age. So after annual conference, the staff will be reaching out to those leagues that need some assistance in this work and helping you try to work through that.
And that's where I think it will also get very nuanced because it will also require looking at relevant case law and any other applicable precedents for those respective jurisdictions.
Does that help, Julie?
Yes, that does. That's helpful. Well, so there won't be anyone at annual conference that will be able to provide information to the individual leagues on the local laws. This will take place after. Is that what you said?
Yes, and I believe it will have to take place after.
Julie, one of the ways that we discovered this wonderful new mosaic of a legal landscape was we had our attorneys go through every single junior league jurisdiction to check public accommodation laws, and we do have all of that information by league community. It's obviously massive. It's 157 communities have one type of restriction or another, and they vary all over the place. And so what we're prepared to do very systematically after annual conference is contact every league and give you the information that we have as a baseline. This obviously would not be something we could maintain or keep current because the amount of effort and expense involved is fairly significant, but we can give you your baseline, and then the leagues will need to do is to do a couple of things. Obviously, immediately contact an attorney, determine the degree to which the league is covered by the public accommodation statute, period, and then understand what the statute says that might impact any current league operations. But we will go league by league and give everybody kind of the baseline information to work from.
Okay. Thanks, Ann. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments, concerns about Motion 1 and the diversity and commitment statement?
Yes, this is Maisha from Junior League of Douglas County, Georgia. At the winter leadership conference, we had a lot of discussion around transgender and males possibly wanting to be members of Junior League. Were there any further discussions on that, or do we know where we're staying with that?
Again, that's a local law issue as it applies to issues of gender identity or transgender status, and that would be information we would be able to give you. That's actually one of the areas where the variation is extraordinary. Insofar as admitting men to membership, none of this changes what we believe to continue to be a defensible position of the junior leagues, and we would certainly be happy to get it out to you, a paper from our attorney that explains that we believe we could defend our right not to admit men, even if men are included as a protected class in a local law or ordinance.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hello, this is Evansville. Evansville is in Indiana, and I'm sure most of you, can you hear me?
Very hard, Lisa.
Okay. Most of you probably have seen locally or nationally, Indiana has made national news with our the new law that was just passed in Indiana. And so I'm on the call because our league is currently concerned of how this might kind of how to handle the backlash of changing the statement and everything. And we were just wondering if there's going to be any guidance if this passes of how leagues can go back with this kind of dynamic that we're currently under, how to approach the public with it.
So you're not necessarily talking, because there was a question earlier about if we need to, guide bylaws and things. You're looking for more just what's happening in your area with guidance on how to bring it back to your league, your community. Is that more your question?
Yes, socially. As I said, we're in the state of Indiana, and Indiana has just made national news with our Religious Act law that was just passed, and there's a lot of high tension about diversity right now in Indiana. So we were just wondering if there was going to be some guidance with how we can approach that with our community.
Well, I would say, this is Mary Jo, that the Indiana thing is so brand new that we are all still trying to digest, what it is they're saying. So at this point, I would have to say, and Ann, you can chime in here, that we don't, on this short-term notice, have a marketing plan for you to bring it back.
Yeah. I was saying too.
There would be no issue with. No matter what, this would be the same with any local issue that a league is facing. The association's marketing and communications staff are more than prepared to guide you through key messaging around any issue that has a particularly local nature to it. So absolutely, we can help.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we just don't know what that guidance might look like now, but one of the things that we are all committed to, and this is both AJLI board and staff, is that this conversation about diversity and inclusion doesn't end at annual conference, because I think we all, including the leagues that we've heard from, we want this conversation to go forward. We want to talk about diversity and inclusion and what it means and get more training and conversation. So while we might not be able to answer guidance at this moment, we know we need to go forward with this conversation.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, so if you do, because I'm sure, like myself, the minute you hang up the phone, you'll think of something that you might want to talk about before you get to annual conference or have questions about, so feel free to email us, and I know some of you have already, and we'll try and answer your questions as best we can before we get to annual conference, and then you'll have time at that Friday dialogue to talk to each other about the statements and the motions.
Can I ask a question real quickly?
Mm-hmm.
This is Laura Creekmore from Nashville, and I know one of the things we've talked about in several of these conversations at conferences in the past year is a hope for more talking points and tools related to training our own members on these issues, not just on anything specific that we're facing in our leagues, but just on diversity and inclusion in general. How do we have those conversations? And some of those things we've done in the past year have been very helpful to me to bring back to my own league. Have you all talked about other things that we might do going forward? We've got the Building Blocks book, obviously, which has been a great tool for us, but other concrete ways that we can bring these issues back to our leagues?
This is Mary Jo. I'll answer this for you.
Okay.
I think that's one, as Cynthia said before, this conversation does not stop at annual conference, and both the board and the staff has made a commitment to continue to work with the leagues and to work to bring you new tools, new ideas, new learnings, new strategies. For those of you that, sort of follow this work, you will notice that there's been a lot of conversation in the last probably 6 to 10 months. There seem to be some new thinkings coming, some new training, some new approaches to really helping organizations think about what does it mean to be truly an inclusive and diverse organization. And I think, Building Blocks is a great tool. The staff has made a commitment to update that with some of the newer resources that are available, and also to continue at every conference to have something on this topic for anyone who's attending to gain further knowledge. I also think that the leagues in their own communities may well have access to some things that we may not. And I would hope that the junior leagues that run across good things, good tools, and good strategies also share them back with the AJLI staff and board and other leagues, because this is actually, this is sort of a learning journey that we're all on, not just in the junior leagues, but in our own communities and our own companies and our own families. And we need to sort of all help contribute to the body of knowledge and to move the conversation and the growth forward for everyone. So, yes, Laura, we are committed. We will be, and I think you've seen a little bit more talk about this in the last probably 12 to 18 months, and you will continue to see that going forward. Ann, did you want to add anything?
No, I think, and I also think it's what Laura's raising is that it's not just organizational resources and support, but it's also how do each of us grow as individuals, and that takes it back to the individual member, and all of that would absolutely be a logical part of any plan moving forward.
So as a quick aside, if you all have an extra 3 minutes today, you should Google the Buffalo News and read an editorial on the editorial page about the concept of racism and white privilege, which was written by a woman in regards to a local issue here, which I found fascinating.
Where was that? The Buffalo, which one?
The Buffalo News.
Buffalo News.
It's our daily paper.
Got it. Thank you. And I know this is Cynthia again, as we have, and just to tag what Mary Jo and Ann were saying, we have been, as the board has been going through this process, as we find articles like this, been sharing them just so we all learn. We keep saying this in this ever-changing environment, and the conversation changes, as we just know, just based on what the Indiana League just spoke. So it's changing. There's a lot going on. We all need to keep ourselves educated on it with our leagues and locally. Any other questions for now?
I don't have any more questions on the motions, but I did have a question on the budget. Who should I contact about that? Or will it be discussed at all?
You should contact either Maureen Mackey, the COO of AJLI, or Ginny Jarrett, the treasurer of the AJLI board. Both. Okay.
Julie, do you want one of them to give you a call?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. We can make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Makes my life easier.
That's a good thing.
All right, so if there's no more calls or, questions or concerns for now, I think we are probably finished for this afternoon. So I do want to thank everyone for joining on this call today and having your questions and learning as we go through this, and we will hope to see you all in, 2 weeks. So any questions, you can just email us also, and we'll answer you before we get to conference, too.
Thanks. See you all soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.